In 1968, my husband Bill and I went to Kenya to make a film called An Elephant Called Slowly. It was directed by James Hill, who directed the film Born Free, and we were good friends and worked together quite a lot. We got to Kenya and we went to Tsavo National Park, where Daphne and David Sheldrick lived, and were working on conservation, elephant conservation, but also Daphne rescued little orphaned animals at that time and still does today. We wanted a young elephant, a little 2-year-old for the film, and Daphne at that time only had teenagers. One of them was the famous Eleanor. But David heard that in Nairobi, in the Trappers' Yard, there was a little 2-year-old elephant that had been taken from the wild from her family as a gift by the then government of Kenya to London Zoo. And so we went down to the Trappers' Yard with David to see her, and we saw this terrified little creature rushing about this little pen she was in, and we said to David, how on earth could we ever use this poor little thing, because she's so frightened and, you know, crazy with fear. He said, I think that if I could have her for 2 or 3 days, I'd be able to calm her, soothe her, and you'd find she was going to be perfect. And that's exactly what happened. She was perfect. So we made the film with her, and she bonded, of course, with the teenage elephants. And then at the end of the film, we asked if we could buy her, to give her to Daphne and David to join their little group for 1-day rehabilitation to the wild. And the government said, yes, we could buy her and do that, but that they would have to capture another little elephant. You can imagine what we felt. There was no way that we could possibly ever agree to another little baby being snatched from its family in the wild. And so Poli came to London Zoo, and Bill went to see her once. I was too silly and I thought it'd be too upsetting. But he went and he took some oranges, and of course he was recognised and she greeted him, and it was quite dreadful. And so then we didn't see her for a very, very long time, until one day we had a letter from Daphne Sheldrick telling us she'd heard that Poli was going to be put down. Well, she was 14, 15, she was a teenager. So we went and we started to ask questions, make rather a nuisance of ourselves, actually. In the end, although I had found a reserve in South Africa where she could go, be taught to go back to the wild, the zoo didn't want to go with that plan, but they did say they would send her to Whipsnade, where she would have companions, because she was completely alone in London Zoo. And you know what that means to an elephant, to be alone. So to cut a very long story short, we started to pressure and all that, and she was put in her travelling crate to go to Whipsnade. But unfortunately she collapsed in her travelling crate because she'd been standing in it for such a long time. And she was jacked up out of the crate because they had no lifting gear at the time in the elephant house. And she hobbled about in her den for a few days. And then they examined her leg under anaesthetic. And to know exactly what happened is not quite clear. But in the end, she was put down. And it was her death that gave life to our work as a charity in 1984, in those days called Zoocheck, now the Born Free Foundation. And this year, which is the 30th anniversary, as I've said, of Poli's death, I asked Richard Bonfield, our poet in residence, to write something in her memory, because I felt he was a person who would capture absolutely the essence of what she was, what she still is in our hearts, and how she still matters so much. He said he's called it An Elephant Called Slowly, a eulogy written to mark the 30th anniversary of Poli's death. "Tell me the story of Poly-Poly, grandmother," said the grandchild. "Oh, you've heard it before," said the grandmother. "But it is a story that must be told again and again, as her life changed mine, and the lives of many people and animals around the world. Imagine," said the grandmother, "that you're taken from your mother and then your orphaned friends and flown halfway around the world to be incarcerated in a concrete jungle." "Oh dear, it's so difficult for me to explain," said the grandmother. "And I feel partly responsible. But perhaps we should let Poly-Poly tell the story." "Oh yes," said the grandchild, "please let. Everything would be so much clearer if she told her story in her own particular way." "This then," said the grandmother, wiping away her tears, "is what Poly-Poly had to say. I live, but I am not alive. I rock my head from side to side. I reach for trees that are not there, the freshness of the open air. I am a diplomatic gift. I breathe, but I do not exist. Deprived of all that makes me whole, I'm a waxwork living doll. Deprived of all my kith and kin, I weep beneath my wrinkled skin. I rock my head from side to side. I live, but I am not alive. Taken from my natal home, I am completely on my own, and living is a living hell without my family here as well. I have no partner to confide. I live, but I am not alive. And everyone who looks at me compounds my sense of misery. For all the families who come are having such a lot of fun, whilst every day that I'm alone reminds me that I have no home. The only place I can rewind is in the center of my mind, where Africa is living still, and all my dreams can be fulfilled. That is so sad, said the grandchild. No creature, human or animal, should have to suffer such a fate. I know, said the grandmother. Your grandfather and I tried so hard to have her sent home. We never wanted her to leave Africa in the first place. But our hands were tied. We did visit her, and do you know, she recognized us. But somehow this made it all the harder. For what must Poly-Poly have been thinking about us? Eventually, of course, the authorities agreed to move her to Whipsnade. However, it seems that she just gave up. Rather like the elephant man, she didn't wish to continue as a human exhibit. What would her life have been like if none of this had happened? Said the grandchild. Let me see, said the grandmother. I think it would have gone something like this. The sky rolls back to let us screen the elephant that should have been. A matriarch of many years, a grandmother, a gentle seer. Slowly the elephant that should have been crosses the vast savanna in the evening sunlight. The sun rays illuminate the veins in her ears, which flow like the stained glass rivers of Africa. She has lived for 50 years amongst her peers, growing in grace and majesty beneath her curving tusks, Her children and grandchildren could be seen browsing among the acacia. Her life has not been easy. She lost her firstborn daughter in the great drought, and her firstborn son to lions. Nevertheless, she has learned her wisdom has deep taproots, nourished by the collective unconscious of the herd. She was taught where and when to forage for delicious amarula nuts. Her mother led her to the salt caves, and now she leads her own herd up into the cloud forest in search of shade and luxurious foliage. An elephant needs to live in context, needs to be anchored to its soul's parameters, the landscape of its birth. No elephant is an island. It is part of a vast grey archipelago of lumbering love, of aunts and uncles, of second cousins once removed. Any elephant can only be an elephant when it is part of the circle of elephant life, part of a network of convivial relations. Any elephant can only taught to be an elephant in the classroom of the savannah. And so it was with Slowly. Nurtured by her mother and her aunts, playing with her brothers and sisters, she grew into the elephant she should have been. And now she lumbers across the far horizon, fulfilling all her captured dreams. "Oh," said the grandchild, "that is so marvellous. But Poly didn't die in vain." "No," said the grandmother. "Her life was given as a ransom for many. And now I've done all I can to honour her memory by devoting my life to saving other captured animals. I feel that her soul and mine can rest in peace, and both of us can be released." "What happened to Poly when she died?" said the grandchild. "Well," said the grandmother, "it was rather wonderful. The night that Sister Slowly died, the whole savannah came alive. The daughter of the sun came down, complete with an acacia crown. The orphans she had left behind all raised their trunks and stood in line, and then the angels of her soul returned her spirit to the fold, and all the agonies she faced all disappeared without a trace." "I'm so glad," said the grandchild, "that her born-free spirit came home to rest." "And so am I," said the grandmother. "It is no less than she deserved." "Thank you so much," said the grandchild. "You've done so well. All the animals on earth salute you and your gentle touch. And dearest grandmother, before I go to sleep, I would just like to say that I and all the animals love you very much."